This is the dish you didn't know you needed. Sichuan food is some of the best food in the world, and don't get me wrong, a lot of people respect it, appreciate it, and love it, but I still don't think it gets enough recognition for how good it is. For example, this Mapo Tofu is probably one of the best dishes on the planet, but not enough people talk about it. I was put onto it by my friend David about a year ago, and I'm finally making it for the channel. It's one of the simplest things you can throw together, it doesn't take a lot of time, and you can basically do it all in one pan. It's an enjoyably spicy and super umami packed dish that you need to try. There's also many ways to make this, as it's super customizable, so just use this as a template and get creative. I'm going to start with the titular ingredient, which is 1 pound of firm tofu. You want this to be as firm as you can find so it doesn't break apart when you braise it in the stew. I'm just taking this and cutting it up into rough 1-inch cubes. And one quick step I think is pretty important is to get a pot of boiling water and add a good bit of salt as if you were making pasta. Add your tofu cubes in and boil them for just about a minute. This is just going to help get some salt inside of the tofu, but more importantly it's going to keep them firm. The quick blanch will help set them so they're not breaking apart when we're mixing them in the final dish. And you can just strain those and set them aside until you need them. As far as the rest of the prep, I'm just going to grab about a 2-inch knob of ginger and microplane that. Do the same with about 4 cloves of garlic. And then I'm chopping 4 scallions, making sure to separate the whites from the greens. The greens are always for garnish. Never use them for cooking, or else. Like I said, this is a pretty simple dish, so that's all the real prep you have to do beforehand. I'm now going to grab my wok, which is by far the best vessel to make a dish like this in. This is a carbon steel wok that I love, and I'll link below in case you want to get one like this. The really wide and tall sides like this do a great job of distributing heat quickly and efficiently. But if you don't have one, you could just use a deep cast iron or other big pot, it'll be fine. I'm heating that dry over medium-high heat before adding a couple tablespoons of Sichuan peppercorns. I've cooked with these on the channel before, and they're a great characteristic flavor of Sichuan food. They just bring a nice fruity, spicy, numbing feeling to any dish you add them to. So we're toasting those dry, and I'm also adding in a little bit of gochugaru, which is Korean chili flakes. That's obviously not traditional, and you don't have to add it, but it adds a nice little punch of extra spice that I like. These are going for just a couple of minutes to get some extra toasty flavor, but you don't want them to burn, so take them out before that. I'm then going to add about half of those toasted peppercorns into my molcajete, pounding that into a powder and then adding it back in with the rest of the mixture. It's just nice to have some of it powderized so it's like a regular seasoning, but also have some of the texture of the whole peppercorns. Now I'm going to add a little bit of neutral oil to the wok and heat that on high. Maybe a couple tablespoons to start, we're going to add some more later. I'm using some old peanut oil that we fried a turkey in for Thanksgiving. This stuff adds extra flavor. Then I'm going to add about a ½ pound of ground pork. You could use ground chicken or ground beef or ground lamb or any other meat that you want. This isn't supposed to be the main flavor or the main volume of the dish. We're just going to add some extra flavor with this. So I'm going to add a little bit of salt to individually season the meat. Let that sear for a couple minutes untouched on one side and then flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. And then I'll just start breaking this up into the tiniest bits that I can get it. I want this to turn into tiny little crunchy bits when I'm done because I just want it to supplement the tofu in the dish. So let that go and release all of its water, which will take a few minutes, and then it'll start to fry in the fat, and you'll know it's done when it starts to get really dark and gets this bacon bit texture to it. Remove the meat and try to keep the rest of the oil left in the wok so you can use it to saute your vegetables. First, adding a couple more tablespoons of oil. There's a lot of oil in this dish, by the way. Then I'll add in my chopped scallion whites and the minced garlic and ginger. Stir that around and keep it moving so it doesn't burn. It will cook really quickly. And then we're going to add in one of the most important ingredients in this whole dish, which is some doubanjiang. This is a Chinese fermented chili bean paste, very similar to gochugaru, which I've used many times on the channel for Korean food. This one is a little less sweet and more salty than gochugaru, so I wouldn't substitute it. I'm just adding a couple of tablespoons of this to start and frying it with the vegetables. Just stirring that pretty constantly and letting it fry for about 5 minutes. It's really going to bring out the flavor of that chili paste. But before anything burns, I'm going to deglaze with a couple tablespoons of Shaoxing wine. You could just use white wine or water or whatever you want in this case. And I'm going to finish the liquids with about a ½ cup of stock. You could use chicken stock or veggie stock or bouillon, but I have some frozen mushroom stock cubes. This dish isn't really a soup or a stew, so you don't want too much liquid, but you want a little bit so that the tofu can braise a bit. So after a couple minutes of simmering, I'm going to add back in my pork and mix that in, and then I'll carefully dump in my strained tofu, making sure not to break it up. Once the tofu's in here, you have to be careful stirring this. Just keep the spatula in contact with the pot and move it back and forth. At this point, you can add in your toasted Sichuan peppercorns as well. Now to thicken this up, we're going to go with the Old Faithful cornstarch slurry. I've got a tablespoon or so of cornstarch that I'm adding a tablespoon of water to and mixing that. Pour that in and get it mixed so it doesn't clump up. You'll immediately notice your sauce start to thicken, which is what you want. I let mine semi-braise on a low heat for about 10 minutes just to infuse all the flavors and tenderize the tofu a bit. If you feel like it reduces too much, you can always add more water or stock just to bring it to whatever consistency you want. I'm going to add some final seasonings and flavorings to finish this. First off is some form of chili oil. If you have a homemade one, that's obviously the best, but I'm just going to use this store-bought crunchy garlic oil. If you don't know about the flavor of chili crisp, then you're really missing out and you need to try some on something, even if it's not this dish. This will add an umami bomb to your Mapo Tofu, so don't skip it. And then I'm going to season the taste with some dark soy sauce, or regular soy sauce works. You should need a good bit. I know we seasoned the pork by itself and a little bit the tofu in the water, but as with any home cooked dish, you always need to add some form of salt at the end to taste. I'm also going in with some Chinese black vinegar because I like some acidity in this. Just a couple tablespoons worked for me. Finally, I like a little pinch of sugar in this to counteract some of the spice, but that's optional. And if you feel like you need more of that doubanjiang or anything else we added to this point, you can add that. Just taste one more time at the end to make sure everything agrees. I also forgot until the taste test, but you should add a splash of sesame oil in this to really complete it. Finish with those scallion greens to garnish, and your Mapo Tofu is done. This could be marketed as a 15 to 30 minute dish, but I'm a little more realistic with my recipe time, so I would say this is something that can be done in under an hour. Still really good for the final product that you get. All of the spicy flavors and the aromatics that built the base of this dish, paired with the creaminess and willingness to accept flavor of the tofu, this is super comforting and it warms your soul, and I think almost anybody on the planet would like this. If you or someone you know is a picky eater that finds it hard to eat foreign dishes because you're not familiar with them, I think this is a great place to start because it's really basic, but it's also really deeply flavored. I'm just serving mine up over a bowl of white rice to really absorb all those chili flavors. I'm super excited. I've been waiting a long time to eat this dish, so let's get to the taste test. By the way, shout out to Emmy for making me this really cool t-shirt. It's awesome. This might be something better eaten in the winter when it's not like 100 degrees outside, but I still think I'll be able to enjoy this. Just having this white rice underneath to soak up all the spice and umami flavor from this Mapo Tofu is essential. So as you can see, this is not really a meat dish, even though there's pork in this or beef or whatever you used. They become these tiny little bits of just flavor and they add umami again to your dish. But the real star of the show here is the big chunks of tofu. But let's get in here and see what this hype should be about. Cheers. Just amazing, deep, and pleasantly spicy flavor. To me, there's a lot of dishes out there that are just too spicy, at least for someone like me. I know, I get it. But the ones that seem to nail the level of spice versus the level of enjoyment really seem to get it, and those are my favorite. But like I said, each element of this dish adds its own amount of umami to it. You have your spicy chili crisp, and then you have the doubanjiang, the pork and beef, and the Sichuan peppercorns that we added. Waking them up in a hot wok like this, and then braising the tofu for a little bit, it's just perfection. Who's to say I can't add a little bit more crunchy chili garlic on top? This stuff is amazing. Yes. This is the point in the video that I forgot to add the sesame oil, but I already told you all that. So speaking of oils, obviously not one of the healthiest dishes that you can eat, but there's nothing wrong with treating yourself every once in a while. This really hits the spot. Hopefully I brought somebody new to this dish that didn't know about it before. Hopefully you guys try it. That's gonna be it for me today. Thank you guys for watching, be blessed, and I'll see you next time. Still really need to make dan dan noodles.